Rescissions that are coming up at the federal level, as well as if you are managing a bonus allocation project, what the timelines are in order to ensure that we can deliver these projects and get the funds authorized. Obviously, we work a lot with NCDOT and FHWA in this process, and I think we have a common goal that we don't want to lose a cent of funding. There's just way too many needs in terms of transportation within this region, and we need to be responsible with the funding that we receive. So you all should have an agenda. It's up on the screen as well. Just a quick review of the agenda. We'll go around the room and just see who's here. I'd like you to just point out any of the discretionary projects that you're managing, just so the folks from Raleigh have a good feel for who's all in the room. David Wasserman will then provide an overview of the fund rescission process, and that really affects the congestion mitigation air quality funds and the transportation alternative program funds, as well as the bonus allocation deadline of June 30th of 2020. And then Marta Matthews will provide us a presentation with steps to authorization, specifically how to get the funds authorized so that they're effectively protected from rescission. And she will also talk about some recent changes in the municipal agreement process between NCDOT and the member jurisdictions. Lunch will be provided. We'll bring it in over here. It will be a working lunch. And then really the most important part of this work session is going to occur this afternoon, where we are going to go through each of the projects and figure out where we're at and what tasks need to be done in order to achieve authorization, again, to protect these funds from being rescinded. So with that, let's go around the room and just see who we have here again. Just name, organization, and any of the projects that you're managing. So we'll start over here with Jackie.
Jackie McSwain, I'm from Division 12, and we manage the division, well, I guess it's Statesville and Mooresville projects and Iowa County projects.
Michael Bud, Division 12 also. David Wasserman, NCDOT STIP unit in Raleigh.
Erin Penny, CRTPO staff. Katina Lucas, NCDOT and STIP unit. Mark Matthews, local programs, NCDOT.
Ashley Michael, Charlotte DOT.
David McDonald, Cats. Charlotte Turner, Mecklenburg County Air Quality.
Andy Rinsky, Charlotte DOT. Keith Bryant, Charlotte DOT.
Andrew Ventresca, City of Statesville.
Sherry Ashley, City of Statesville.
Campbell Workley, Tom Morrisville.
Erica Martin, Town of Morrisville.
Brad Johnson, ICAS Transportation.
Ron Schultz, ICAS.
Scott Miller, NCDOT Division 10.
Aaron Tucker, Town of Lewis.
John Buchanan, Town of Fort
Sarah Walls, Mills.
Todd Singer, Town of Union Trail.
Kenzie Zimmerman, City of Charlotte Engineering.
Stuart Bassett, NCDOT Division 10.
Brett Knight, NCDOT Division 10. And your ranking rights on
I'm Tim Kirk, I'm the local projects manager or engineer at Division 10.
Jim Capilla, Cast Development. Tim Bowman, NCDOT Division 10, Project Development Engineer.
I'm Laura Master Francesco. I'm the Town of Huntersville engineer.
Bill Cox, Town of Huntersville Planning.
Burt Lynn, Mecklenburg County Park and Recreation Department.
Mr. Jackie, Town of Memphis.
Curtis Bridges, CRTPO staff. Dr. CRTPO.
Augustine Rodriguez, CRTPO staff.
Judy Delbert McGee, CRTPO.
Jennifer Stafford, City of Charlotte, Eastside Waste Management.
Ashley Bonner, CDOT, Intelligent Transportation Systems.
Great, thanks everybody. And before I turn it over to David, just some housekeeping. We have water over here to the side if you want some water. And then if you're not familiar with the building, the bathrooms are out the door to the left. There are two bathrooms kind of as you walk out to the main area there, but then there are some additional bathrooms if you walk down the hallway and hang a right, so there's signs for that. So at this point, I will turn it over to David Wasserman with the STIP unit, and he will be talking about the funds rescission process.
Thank you, Neil, and really thank you for everyone for coming out here today. As Neil said, what we want to do is make sure we're all on the same page in terms of where an understanding of where we are, particularly with CMAC TAP-DA and bonus allocation funds, just to make sure we don't lose those to those area. So let's see, we're going to have an overview presentation in terms of what the rescission is, in case you are not familiar with it. Some of these slides may look familiar to you, especially if those of you who were at the TCC and MPO board earlier this month. But before we begin, just want to make sure it's kind of set the framework in terms of understanding of key terms. So let's see, we have these four terms. One of them's, they're out of the sequencing out of order here. Oh, there we go. Program funds or program projects. These are projects that are in the STIP, and they are scheduled and they have funding assigned for them. So that's one key term. Committed. These are projects, and this is specifically used for projects that go through the prioritization process. They're selected through the STI prioritization process. Essentially, those projects have been selected. They are programmed with, in this case, going to be right-of-way or construction. The first year right-of-way or construction is in year 2025 or sooner than that. Those are considered safe. They're considered committed. We are moving forward with those. Those do not have to go through reprioritization in P6.0 or a later round. Then we have authorized. Essentially, when the request to use federal funds on a project has been approved by FHWA. NCDOT submits the authorization working with FHWA, and once we get approval, essentially those funds are authorized. Now then we have obligated, and oftentimes those terms are used interchangeably. But really what's the difference there? It's when federal funds have officially been assigned to that project. It's more on the accounting side. So, but again, we use those terms interchangeably. In most cases, that's okay. Just from a federal definition, they have slightly different meaning. So for the purposes of today, we're going to focus on authorized. We'll use that term quite a bit. And then the agreement, as Marta will talk about here a little bit, is a legally binding document between NCDOT and the local area that describes the project scope and funding and cost share. And we'll get into the details of that here in a little while. Any questions on these terms? Marta, please correct me if I've misspoken at all. All right, so this is a slide you all may have seen before, but just want to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of the federal funding. Every Transportation Authorization Act, and we're currently operating under the FAST Act, which expires in 2020, the state gets an apportionment. Basically, it says, we're going to give you this, the federal government says, we're going to give you this big bucket of funds, and they're divided amongst these 10 different pots on the bottom. In reality, it looks like this in terms of what the pots size look like. And so when they give us an apportionment, it's basically saying that's the ceiling. That's as much as DOT can get over that period. Well, then every year on an annual basis through the Appropriations Act, Congress authorizes DOT to spend a certain amount, and that's known as the obligation limit or oblimit. Basically saying, yeah, we told you we could give you all these funds, but we're only going to let you spend about 90% of it. And so that obligation authority, what's in green there, is distributed amongst those 10 different buckets of money. And just for make sure we're on the same page here, NHPP is National Highway Performance Program. STBG is Surface Transportation Block Grant. You have your Surface Transportation Block Grant direct attributable. Those are the funds that go to the MPOs over 200,000 people. Obviously, CRTPO is one of the larger recipients of that. HSIP is Highway Safety Improvement Program. CMAC, Congestion Mitigation Air Quality. National Highway Freight Program. Your planning funds that go to the MPOs. Your Transportation Alternatives Program. Your Highway Rail Crossings, and your Transportation Alternative Program, again, that goes to the larger MPOs. So when those when the obligation authority is really distributed amongst those different pots, you can see that there are some pots that typically don't get the full amount. And that's because based on historical perspective, we're not always able to authorize them or spend them as appropriate. So essentially, the obligation, we don't always use the full obligation authority for these areas. And this is just this is not just an issue here in CRTPO, it's an issue all across the state, just being able to deliver those projects on time and with a budget. So particularly in the FAST Act, again, that's that Federal Transportation Authorization Act we're operating under. As part of that FAST Act, when that was approved, I think in 2015, basically there calls for rescission about $7.6 billion for 2020. Now, with that, July 1 is actually when those funds will be taken down. But the actual amount of funds is going to be based on the unobligated balances at the end of the fiscal year that ends in September. In terms of what is subject to rescission, you can see many of those same buckets that we talked about earlier are subject to rescission. However, STBG and the STBG-DA pots, the safety money and the highway rail crossing funding, those are safe. Those are not subject to rescission. So essentially what this means is that any balances that we have in those 6 different buckets at the end of this year will be rescinded, will be wiped clean. And that will be wiped clean on July 1, 2020.
David, is that a total wipe or is that a percentage of the 7.6?
It's whatever remaining we have available in each of those pots.
We've got left in those pots.
Yes. So really, how will this affect North Carolina? From early numbers from almost 2 years ago said we'd have $166 million rescinded. Reality is it's going to be less than that because we've been doing a really good job over the last couple of years of trying to get our unobligated balances down. But a lot depends on how we can get those remaining funds authorized by 2019. So we've been working with the MPOs and the recipients of the CMAC TAP-DA and other funds to make sure we spend down those balances by 2019, by the end of this fiscal year. So again, the calculation for the rescissions be based on September 30th. Reality is, just FYI, the federal, when we're going to talk about authorization of funds, that needs to happen before September 30th. The federal government will shut down essentially by September 20th or so to do their end of year accounting. So any authorizations must occur before September 20th, I believe. And so obviously the more funds we obligate or authorize by September of this year, the better shape we are. And again, as we talked about, the biggest challenge is going to make sure that these particular funding pots are spent down. And I can tell you, as a state, since the TAP funds, that's something that those projects are programmed through projects that go through STI. We're doing everything we can to make sure we're obligating those funds. And so really don't have many issues there. Again, it's the last 2 that we're really focusing on here. So just graphically what we're talking about. So essentially, like I say, use it or lose it by September 30th, and it's really probably September 20th. If you feel that you are not going to be able to make that date in whatever particular phase of construction, we need to make sure we have a backup plan. So let's say you had, as an example, construction planned to use CMAC funds, and you had planned to authorize it in 2019, but realized you're not going to be able to make September to authorize it. You need to have a backup plan, and that might be working with the MPO to try to use TAP-DA funds in 2020, depending what type of project, or STBG-DA funds in 2020 or beyond, but going through the MPO's process to look for those funds. And then one last note is that you do have the ability, the MPOs do have the ability to transfer up to 50% of your funds for an STBG eligible purpose. So that does mean if it doesn't look like you're going to be able to spend the TAP-DA funds as an MPO, then you could transfer those funds potentially use on a highway project or other eligible type project. Yes.
Can you talk about that just a little bit more?
So in the federal law, we are allowed to the MPO is allowed to transfer up to 50% of their TAP-DA funds over based on the total apportionment, I believe, over the 5-year FAST Act period. So whatever funds that can't be authorized, we could transfer over to STBG. Need be. Andy?
I guess for the second bullet, this might be a question for Aaron. Do we have capacity in either of those categories? The second bullet?
To swap STBG-DA?
Yeah, in
There is a little bit of flexibility there, and we can work with Aaron in terms of how you cash flow projects so you can get more money up front, and it's something we do on the STI projects, Bill.
David, the CMAC dollars, are those for the September 2019 authorization? Are those our CMAC dollars, or do they also include the statewide CMAC?
All CMAC dollars will be rescinded, yes. But there will be, the state is embarking on a new process for looking at using and prioritizing and selecting projects for CMAC dollars in 2020. So basically we're saying 2019 is the last year that you are guaranteed CMAC dollars right now. Any future CMAC dollars will have to go through this new process that's being worked on. So if you had planned to use CMAC dollars in 2020 for a project, I would not count on that. So any other questions on this?
Talk about CMAC dollars that we were, for 2019 or prior CMAC dollars, because we do have monies that are, set to be used in 2020.
So anything that's in 2020 or beyond is kind of off the floor. That's subject to going through this new process. I would not count on those dollars right now in 2020 or beyond.
That's new.
It's something that the secretary's put forth initiative in working with several work group of folks with MPOs and RPOs across the state. I think Aaron actually is part of that. You're part of that committee, correct? So any other questions on this? Sounds like we may need to.
Have a conversation about that one, because there were some promises made.
And there may be, we can certainly talk about that after. I think that was it. Tim?
If a project loses funds because of the rescission, can they still go through the new 2020 process to try to get additional CMAC funds to finish their projects?
Yes, I mean, I would suspect that whatever process folds out, there'll be an opportunity for those projects to go through that process. And, the thought is, and Aaron, feel free to chime in, but it's more going to be a needs-based approach, probably using data, probably somewhat structured similar to STI, but the question is, I don't think that the group's far enough along at this point. Dan?
Is it going to be turned into a statewide competition?
I don't think they're far enough along to be able to answer that yet.
What's the group's name that this is happening under?
Do you know the official?
The CMAC work group, there's.
Is it out of the P5, or is it just?
It's a different group.
There's been one meeting.
Yeah. So, don't want to focus too much on that, but I just want to say, I just want to bring that up so basically everyone understands we cannot count on future CMAC dollars to help fund the project.
Just one follow-up question. Who's staff on that? NCDOT staff? Is it coming out of Julie White's group, or is it some other?
I mean, NCDOT is staff to that. Who's that particular staff person?
Heather Hildebrand.
Okay.
Heather Hildebrand.
Oh,
Yes.
With the funds and subject to rescission, if they're currently being held up by a waiver request,
Funds being held subject.
by American waiver request?
More sounds like you can answer that one better.
Yeah, no, you can't authorize the funds unless you get the waiver approved, or unless you say, we will comply with America. Whatever.
The other thing.
I don't think I've approved any waivers.
The other thing to remember is with any time we're going to use federal funds for project, that project needs to be completed within 10 years, or else the funds have to be paid back. And so hopefully that's not the case with any project here, but just something for you to be aware of.
10 years of authorization, David.
I believe so. Loretta's not here, is she? No. I can. So.
So to clarify the last bullet, so say, we keep talking about CMAC, say a project determines they're not going to meet that September the 20th deadline, does that mean, and you could transfer it to try to come up with another way to fund it, but does that mean that the dollars that were associated with it are completely lost? Does that assume there's no way to reallocate that at this point? Is that correct?
So the state has, so if you have a project that was expected to receive CMAQ funds, let's say in 2019, and you weren't gonna be able to authorize it by September, the state has a backup plan. And so the state will do everything we can. We will use those CMAQ funds on another eligible statewide project to make sure North Carolina does not lose those funds. And we'll be reaching out to you all probably early August, mid-August, just to find out where you all are in the status of those CMAQ funds. At that point, you know, if it doesn't look like you'll be able to make the September date, we'll probably use those funds on another project.
But it's mentioned, I'm sorry, but it mentions 2020, but we're talking about getting it by 2019. If it was really, really close, it wouldn't matter, it sounds like. If you're like, you know, if it's gonna come down to the wire, the 2020 still doesn't matter. 'Cause
Correct.
technically you have a year
Correct.
beyond that, but we're not going to.
Correct. So for 2020, if you had let's say, construction for CMAQ in 2020, we probably need to look at using another funding source for that.